Hi, everyone. It's 4 o'clock in the East. I'm Chris Jansing in for Nicole Wallace. Today, a revealing new interview exposes a president in retreat at the height of the coronavirus pandemic in the United States. A defensive Donald Trump facing off against Jonathan Swan of Axios, unwilling to accept a shred of responsibility for a death toll that's more than doubled early projections from the White House. Unable to acknowledge a testing shortage across the country that's made contact tracing and containment impossible, and outright incapable of acknowledging the grief and the pain of the millions of Americans touched by this virus. Swan, through meticulous preparation and reflexive pushback against Donald Trump's most misleading claims, offers an alarming portrait of the country's president and his distorted view of his own response to the pandemic. Here is just one piece of that interview.
When can you commit, by what date, that every American will have access to the same day testing that you get here in the White House?
Well, we have great testing. We're doing, and
by what
other
date?
People do. Let me explain. The testing. We have tested more people than any other country, than all of Europe put together times 2. And, you know, there are those that say, you can test too much. You do know that.
Who says that?
Oh, just read the manuals, read the books.
Manuals?
Read the
What
books.
manuals?
Read the books.
What books?
The point is, because we are so much better at testing than any other country in the world, we show more cases.
The figure I look at is death. And death is going up now.
Okay,
and it's 1,000 a day.
If you look at death...
Yeah, it's going up
look.
again.
Let's look.
Daily death.
Take a look at some of these charts.
I'd love to.
We're going to look.
Let's look.
And if you look at death...
Yeah. It's started to go up
here's
again.
One. Well, right here, the United States is lowest in numerous categories. We're lower than the world.
Lower than the world?
We're lower than
What is that?
Europe.
In what?
Look.
In what?
Take a look. Right here. Here's case death.
Oh, you're doing death as a proportion of cases. I'm talking about death as a proportion of population. That's where the US is really bad.
Well,
much worse than South Korea, Germany, etc.
you can't do that.
I've covered you for a long time. I've gone to your rallies. I've talked to your people. They love you. They listen to you. They listen to every word you say. They hang on your every word. They don't listen to me or the media or Fauci. They think we're fake news. They want to get their advice from you. And so when they hear you say everything's under control, don't worry about wearing masks, I mean, these are people, many of them are older people,
What's
Mr.
your
President.
definition of control? Yeah. Under the
It's giving them a false sense of
right
security.
now, I think it's under control. I'll tell you what.
How? 1,000 Americans are dying a day.
They are dying. That's true. And it is what it is. But that doesn't mean we aren't doing everything we can. It's under control as much as you can control it.
The president's words, "It is what it is," heard around a country dealing with near unprecedented suffering. The Miami Herald reported that 2 teenagers have died from COVID complications. Dr. Fauci is confirming Dr. Birx's declaration Sunday that the pandemic is spreading out of control. U.S. cases topping 4.7 million, deaths topping 156,000. And thousands of Americans bracing for an unprecedented eviction wave as federal relief dries up. The grief and anxiety that the nation feels, but that Trump does not, is amplified now by the stories of suffering coming from every part of this country. Family members of David Nagy of Texas, who died needlessly of COVID, according to his family, sending out a message of outrage that has struck a chord. Here's part of the obituary that they penned for their local paper, later reported in the Washington Post. And I'm quoting here. Family members believe David's death was needless. They blame his death and the deaths of all the other innocent people on Trump, Texas Governor Greg Abbott, and all the politicians who did not take this pandemic seriously and were more concerned with their popularity and votes than lives. Also to blame are the many ignorant, self-centered, and selfish people who refuse to follow the advice of the medical professionals, believing their right not to wear a mask was more important than killing innocent people. It's a theme echoed by more and more grieving families, the Post writes. Quote, obituaries with political messages have been on the rise during the pandemic. In July, the daughter of a man who died of COVID-19 penned a blistering obituary in the Arizona Republic, writing that her father's death was due to the carelessness of politicians who continue to jeopardize the health of brown bodies. An obituary in the Citizen Times in Nashville, North Carolina, for Sandra Schuler Thomas in July, encouraging mourners to use her death as motivation to vote in the coming presidential election. In lieu of flowers, think of Mrs. Thomas while casting your vote to remove President Trump from office, it said. These are the unfiltered voices of grief from families paying the price for Donald Trump's delusions and failures. But as far as Trump is concerned, it is what it is. The American presidency, detached from reality, is where we start today. Axios national political reporter Jonathan Swan, who we saw in that clip, is here, plus professor of journalism and politics at Morgan State University and a contributor for The Grio, Jason Johnson, and former Democratic Senator Claire McCaskill. This is a tour de force, to say the least, Jonathan. So kudos that have been repeated all across the journalistic spectrum, all across the spectrum of anyone who cares about what's happening in this country today. But of the many, many things that you were able to extract from the president in this interview, the one that I think so many people are talking about, and I want to know what went through your mind when you heard it, is what I just said. It is what it is.
Well, it was a moment where I was trying to actually get the president to grapple with the reality that America, when you compare it to other advanced countries on the measure of death from this virus as a proportion of population, America does very badly indeed. It's not the worst in the world, but it's not far off. And there's a very basic question, which is, why is it that the United States of America, with all of its wealth, with all of its resources, with all of its scientific and technological advancement, finds itself in this terrible position? And instead of grappling with that question, the president had brought along his own charts to basically try to sell the story that it wasn't as bad as it seemed, that it was under control, and that, in fact, it was a much rosier picture than the raw statistics paint. So it was a very striking part of the interview.
And people can judge for themselves whether they think the president, even though he was armed with those charts, had control over what the information was that they contained or understood it. But I thought there was another point, and you made it so clearly and so definitively, and that I think is so important as we continue to watch the number of deaths and the number of cases rise, and that is explaining to the president how much a large portion of this country, even though it's not a majority, but a large portion of this country still believe him, a large portion of this country that don't believe his lies are lies, who are listening to him for guidance, who are listening to him because they believe he is telling them the truth. And then to watch, it wasn't even so much what he said, but his physical reaction when you confronted him with the truth, Jonathan.
Yeah, well, so that was a section of the interview where I was trying to get him to grapple with the concept of communication from a leader in a public health crisis. When you talk to public health experts, they'll tell you that probably the most important thing a president or a leader can do in a public health crisis is provide the public with accurate, reliable, credible, and consistent information, because obviously behavior is so important. Social distancing, wearing masks, all those behaviors are so important in stemming the flow of the virus. And I put it to the president that he hadn't done that, and that for month after month, not just in the early days when a lot of people were wrong about this, but March, April, May, and even in June, convening what is still the largest indoor gathering in the United States since the pandemic hit, which was his rally in Tulsa. And my question to him was, why did you do that? But he heard it as me challenging him on his crowd size, which was not what I was doing at all and was quite beside the point. In fact, he went on to say that his crowd was much larger than I reported. Let me play that
because it's a really one of the many great moments in the interview, but we have that. So let's play that exchange with the president.
But Tulsa was a very good. Oklahoma was doing very well as a state. It was almost free. It spiked a month later, month and a half, 2 months later, but it was a good area. We had a tremendous crowd. We had tremendous response. You couldn't even, it was like an armed camp. You couldn't even get through. You couldn't get anybody in.
But I'm
we had 12,000 people. It was incorrectly reported.
I think you misunderstand me. I'm criticizing your ability to draw a crowd. Are you kidding me? I've covered you for 5 years. You draw massive crowds, you get huge ratings. I'm asking about the public health.
And I canceled another one. I had to cancel it. Right. We were going to have a great crowd in New Hampshire, and I canceled it for the same reason.
I mean, that obviously wasn't what he said at the time, which was that the cancellation was weather-related and that it would be rescheduled with it, which it wasn't. But I think what that points to, it's that same failure to accept responsibility, Jonathan.
Well, again, it's not. Again, it's reflective of where his mind is at on these matters, and there it was primarily about defending the size of his crowd and the ratings, when my question was a question about public health and the wisdom of convening the largest indoor gathering on American soil since the pandemic. And, you know, I'd been in the Oval Office with him the day before that Tulsa rally, and on the record asked him whether he'd recommend masks, and he said he'd recommend people do whatever they want. So it was really a question about presidential leadership and presidential communication. But I think it was somewhat revealing that he heard it as me challenging him on his crowd sizes, which I wasn't doing.
Let me just ask you quickly, because as you just pointed out in that exchange, you've been covering him for years. As he is 3 months out, how do you find him? Is he very different than somebody you interviewed just months ago? What was your sense of the president?
Donald Trump, you know, I don't buy into a lot of the stories that he's changed in some substantial way since June of 2015. I don't believe he has. I believe he's got the same character traits, the same Donald Trump that we've seen consistently in public life, going back much further than that. And it's the same again now. But what I do see is somebody who believes that he has a more energetic base than Joe Biden, and that he can win by appealing to that base and revving them up more and more and more heading into November. This is not someone who is trying to do a cross over the aisle type of campaign, or reaching out to, you know, Democrats or even, you know, soft Republicans who've abandoned him. This is going to be a turnout election, and you can see that in his public posture.
And Jason, I want to bring Claire and Jason in. I was thinking, as I learned that you were going to be on the show, I thought, wow, if I was in his position, I would be teaching this interview, and not to make this all about you, Jonathan Swan, although, again, I can't even say enough about what you did here. But the preparation, and again, for me, the reaction of this president when he is confronted with the facts.
Well, you know, I thank you for asking that. One of the things that hit me, honestly, about the effectiveness of Jonathan's interview was not just the reactions he got out of the president, but here's the thing. Donald Trump lies so much and so consistently that it's very easy to sort of argue with him, as we saw on Fox, and then you have to go and do a pre-tape edit and go in and say, OK, this is why we know we were lying. What was smart about what Jonathan did is you had the information right there. You could throw the information right at him. And I will also point out this. I teach at a historically black college and university. I really doubt that Donald Trump would have been able to have that kind of conversation if the interviewer was a woman or a person of color, because his hostility level towards being asked questions, that we've seen with like Yamiche Alcindor and other women, it is much more hostile if he is being questioned by people of color or women. So part of this was also just demographic, in addition to being a very, very effective and well-organized interview. Yeah,
and I don't know, Claire, how many people are out there who can now be unsure about whether they think this president is a credible purveyor of facts. But if there are minds to be changed, I think, you know, look, we have been in this for months and months and months. And one of the things, again, that Jonathan pressed him about is when rapid tests were going to be available. He couldn't answer that question. He couldn't give a date beyond soon. Now they send out overnight this campaign email telling supporters to wear masks. And this is the quote: "I don't love wearing them either. Masks may be good, they may be just okay, or they may be great." they can possibly help us get back to our American way of life. We're in August, and he's writing that masks, Claire, may be good.
Yeah. I think you need a full 2 hours for this interview. Seriously. I'm getting worn out a little bit with telling Jonathan how great it was, but it really was revealing. And there was so much in this interview that we haven't even touched on. I mean, here's a law and order president who tries to say that a child sex predator who has just been arrested might be innocent. And he said John Lewis will be remembered for not coming to his swearing in. I mean, he never asked Putin about bounties on American soldiers. I mean, there is topic after topic after topic. Really say to the people in this country that are paying attention to him, around 30% of our population, that you've got to wear a mask. And after watching this interview, and everyone should, I got one thing to say. I know who should be afraid of debates, and it's not Joe Biden.
Well, that will lead me into my final question for you, Jason, which is, will there be a debate, do you think? And what would we see if we had a Joe Biden who, like Jonathan Swan, came prepared and came loaded for bear with facts? Again, just the facts.
Honestly, I would roll the die on whether we're going to get a debate. It would not shock me for Donald Trump to back out of it, especially if the numbers look bad. He wouldn't want to have the interaction. I wouldn't be surprised if he walked off stage. It almost seemed like he was going to do that against Hillary Clinton. The only danger, quite frankly, in going into a debate for this 2020 year is that the expectations for Donald Trump will be so low that if he does not pull like a Chevy Chase Gerald Ford thing and fall all over himself and spit or say the N-word on the air, people will think that he actually did a good job. That's literally the only danger, because there's no way that he could intellectually or linguistically compete with Joe Biden or any of the other Democrats that ran this year, because I don't think the president has that level of discipline or concentration.
Everyone stays. Thanks to all of you. When we come back, we're going to have more from Jonathan's incredible interview. What Trump had to say when he was asked to reflect on the legacy of the late Congressman John Lewis. We're going to play